name's Giovanna Rossini. I'm a coloratura soprano, and I'll be graduating from university at the end of this semester. I remember I was getting really sick before performances, like constantly. I would get really stressed out, and then I would get sick, and it would be even worse. I didn't really understand why at the time, but since I've started to realize that when I would stress myself out before performances, I just opened myself up to being sick more. I wasn't necessarily sleeping well, I wasn't eating the best, and I would be spending every living second in the practice room, which you do need to practice, but doing all of that did not help me when it came to preventing sickness. It was a really stressful time. I didn't really know how to best handle it necessarily at the time. I tried my best, but I have learned a lot since then. So I just wanted to share some tips for anyone who's auditioning for university or has some other important performance coming up. If you're a singer like me, it means a lot to you, and you don't want to lose out on a chance because you got sick. If you get sick like I did, there are things you can do to recover at least enough so that you can perform. First of all, let me just make something really clear. I don't have a medical degree. This isn't really medical advice so much as it is just learning how to care for your voice. I'm giving advice based on what I've learned works for me over many years of training and practice. So please talk to your doctor if you think anything I talk about in this might be helpful for you. As singers, our instrument, our voice, is a part of our body. It's so tightly tied, and if you don't take care of yourself, your voice is going to suffer. So first of all, the most important aspect is preventative care. You've got to make sure that you're sleeping, eating well, washing your hands, doing all of that usual stuff. But especially do not forget to sleep. I know that is one of the things that's easiest to let go by the wayside. I've definitely not always followed my own advice on this one, where I'm not sleeping as much as I should before performances, but I've tried to be more mindful of that as years have gone on. You don't need to be living every second in the practice room leading up to a performance. You need to be taking care of yourself and getting sleep. Now, it's not that you'll never get sick again, but you can reduce how often it happens. Your voice is part of your body, so please take care of yourself. Now, in this video, I'm just going to be talking about treatments for common illnesses like sore throat, sinus infection, or the cold, things that can really affect your singing. And as a general rule, a singer should not use any medication unless it's absolutely necessary. You just don't know how it's going to affect your voice. Medications can have a lot of side effects on your voice that you just can't really predict very well. And so if you can avoid it, it's best to stick with things like tea, soup, steam. Now, if you are genuinely sick, you do need to take some medications, and I'll get to that in a moment. But first, I always recommend starting with, my favorites are green tea and chamomile tea, especially if you add a little bit of honey. Maybe if it's in the evening, you're realizing you're starting to get sick, drink a little bit of chamomile tea with honey before you go to bed. But just be cautious, because not all teas are created equal. You especially need to be cautious of herbal teas. Herbal teas can be good in moderation, but not all of them should be consumed regularly or in large amounts. Like passion flower is used in some calming teas, but it can cause low blood pressure if you drink it too often. And tea containing licorice root often has the opposite effects. It can cause high blood pressure. Neither one is good. Another good home remedy is just steam. Inhaling steam from a vaporizer device, a bowl of hot water, or taking a warm shower can help a lot. it really just helps to kind of, how do I say this? It helps clear my sinuses, helps me with draining mucus. It just, all in all, makes me feel really good. Now, usually also at about this point, I will try to reduce how much I am talking or how much strain that there is on my voice, because you don't want it to get worse than it already is. You do not want to deal with, a sore throat even after you're technically healed because you've, abused it during your sickness. If you want to do some research on your own just to kind of study and learn more about your voice and how to better take care of it, honestly, I would recommend this book. It's by one of my professors, Dr. Rachel Gates. This is her owner's manual to the voice. It has so much good information in there, and she explains the reasoning behind a lot of things that I'm going to say and more far better than I could ever do. Another good source that was recommended to me is a book called The Vocal Athlete, and I hope I'm saying the author's name right. Leborn. Both books offer a lot of information that will help you maintain your vocal health. However, if you're too sick to strictly rely on home remedies, there are good options for over-the-counter medications that you can take. Honestly, the first thing that I always reach for are my cough drops. While I'm trying to figure out how bad the sickness is, maybe if I have a sore throat or if I just have a cold, that might change how I treat it. Just for while I'm figuring that out, I might take some of these. Now, you can't just use any old cough drops. You have to be careful about exactly what is in your cough drops. So, for example, here's a kind of cough drops that if I'm not specific enough when I'm sick and I ask someone to go get me some, they might get me these, which I really shouldn't be taking. At least not if I'm planning on singing or practicing at all during this time. If I'm just planning on keeping my mouth shut and not even talking for a little while, then I might take these if I need to in a pinch, at least until I can get my hands on the other cough drops. You definitely shouldn't rely on these. Back when I was in high school, still auditioning for universities, I didn't know that. And I went into a voice lesson with my professor, and I'm not sure what I had, if it was a cold or a sore throat or what. We had told her, so I probably wouldn't be able to do any particularly high songs that day. I'd have to take it easy, that sort of thing. But she noticed that I was popping a bunch of cough drops before my lesson. So she asked if there was menthol in them, and I said at the time I didn't know, because I didn't know that was something I needed to look for. So she asked to see the package, and, well, menthol. These particular ones have 5.8 milligrams. And that's a lot. The reason why you can't have menthol in cough drops like this, or at least you shouldn't have menthol in your cough drops as a singer, is because it numbs your throat. And if it numbs your throat, you might push your voice harder than you should. Your voice needs to be taken care of. You need to be aware of if your throat is hurting. Yeah, no one wants to feel the pain, but to some degree you need to as a singer, because that's telling you shouldn't be singing right now, or at least you shouldn't be doing anything super strenuous with your voice. This includes whispering, interestingly enough. Do not whisper when you have a sore throat. It's actually harsher on your vocal cords. Try to speak as normally as possible, or for me, I might kind of try and switch my placement a little bit so that I feel like I'm singing when I'm talking, rather than kind of sitting here in my throat here. I'll go into my headspace, so it's more up here. But knowing that you shouldn't have too much menthol, it is very difficult to find cough drops without any menthol in it. So like, for example, these ones that I really love. These have 1.1 milligram of menthol in them. You still shouldn't be popping them like candy, but they are very helpful, and I will pop some of these when I can't be drinking a lot. So I'll drink tea, water, juice, whatever I can really that will soothe my voice and keep it lubricated. And when I can't drink for whatever reason, I'll pop one or two of these in, and that will help carry me until I'm able to continue drinking and doing whatever I need to do to prevent myself from coughing. Now, the problem with my favorite cough drops is that they don't have a cough suppressant, which ultimately is what you need to do. There are several types of over-the-counter cough suppressants available, but again, singers need to be very careful, in particular about which ones they choose. Before I started learning what I should be taking from my professors, I didn't really know what to look for. You have to try to avoid antihistamines and antitussives. I tend to prefer Mucinex or the off-brand because most of the other ones that I've found include antihistamines and antitussives, which, if you want to learn more, again, I do recommend the owner's manual for the voice. It will explain it a lot better than I ever could. Honestly, the off-brand usually works better for me because there are more in a container than there are usually in the name brand packages. If I buy the name brand, oftentimes I'll go through this, less than a week, matter of a couple of days, depending on the type that I have. You have to take more than you would if you just take these. Now let me tell you, there have been some really bad times that I've gotten sick. Like a couple of years ago, I forget if it was that at the time or if it was mono. I got sick with both that year. It was not fun. But on one of those, I was coughing so badly that I could not sleep. I would cough myself awake, and it was honestly terrible pain. So in that scenario, at least the night version of the name brand did help me stay asleep as well as suppress my cough. But when you're already struggling and you're sick and you need sleep, but you just are constantly waking yourself up from your sleep because of pain and coughing, it's not... I never want to go through that again if I can at all help it, so I've made sure to keep these things around until I can go out to the store and get more, or until I can get someone else to get some for me. Because when you're sick, you don't want to be going out to the store. But what about when you're in pain? You have a headache, you have a painful sore throat, maybe you have a cramp, just whatever it is, you're in pain, and it's preventing you from standing up and singing in the right position, and you just need some extra help. Now, when I was younger, my family always ended up going with naproxen sodium, or, if you don't know, that would be basically like Aleve. I used to buy a lot of this. However, Tylenol is the better option just because there are fewer side effects that could affect your voice. I mean, neither one is perfect, but possible side effects, Tylenol is generally the better option. I mean, if you've been taking naproxen sodium and you're singing just fine, that's up to you. But if you're unsure maybe how your voice would react, or you just don't want to take the chance, Tylenol or the off-brand is the better option. Unless, of course, you're allergic, in which case only take medicine that you know is not going to actively harm you. Whatever side effects may come from, naproxen sodium, it's not worth it to try and take something like Tylenol if you're allergic. Now, sometimes when you come down with an illness that you haven't had before, or maybe you just don't have as much experience with, that can be a problem, which for me, that was a sinus infection last summer. I honestly don't remember the last time I had one, at least, prior to that. I'm sure it probably happened at least once or twice when I was a kid, but I don't remember it. When I was abroad in Europe, because I was going to be going to Austria for a music program, opera singing specifically, my family decided, you know what, Mom and your little sister have never gone anywhere in Europe. Let's make a family trip of it. It's not going to happen again for a long time. Make it a good one. So my family was traveling around a lot, actually. We went to Spain, France, visited my aunt in Germany before I would eventually go to Austria and they would come back home. However, while we were traveling around, I got really sick. We were at the Palace of Versailles, and as we were leaving, I suddenly felt really, really sick to the point where I almost thought I was going to collapse, and I was trying to rush out of there as quickly as I could, to the point where my family was shouting to me that I needed to stop or come back. I couldn't muster the energy to go back to them, so I just stopped and stood where I was until they caught up. I think I might have actually even crouched down because I couldn't keep myself standing before we kept going again. And eventually we stopped somewhere to get some food, and my dad had to go off to find medicine for me. I don't even remember what medicine he managed to find at the time. I don't speak any French, but of course none of my family's main language is French. My mom knew a little bit from high school. My dad knew enough from, growing up in Canada, but it still is not quite the same. My dad ran off to try and find a pharmacy that was open and try to track down some medicine that I could take just for the time being so that I would actually be somewhat functional so we could get back to the hotel room. But of course, the problem is that I needed to learn new music for this opera program that was coming up in a couple of weeks, and I was not feeling well. It was awful. I ended up missing a couple days of the family's trip because I had to stay in the hotel room, miserable, trying to recover. But I eventually managed, and while I'm not honestly certain if the medicine I was being given at the time was technically, good for a singer to take, I kind of had to take what I could at that moment, especially since I don't understand French well enough to read the exact ingredients. Thankfully, I'm not allergic to anything, at least when it comes to medicine, but it would have been difficult. And at least I had someone there who could run to the store for me if I didn't have anyone there, if I was alone and no one else could go to the store for me. I honestly don't know what I would have done. But regardless, I eventually started to get better. But once my sore throat started to go away, I suddenly got a sinus infection. I went immediately from recovering from a sore throat to having a sinus infection, and I couldn't breathe. So thankfully by this point we were in Germany with my aunt, and I at least had a general understanding of the language. I'm not fluent by any means, but I enjoy learning it, and with my aunt's help, I was able to find this, a Nasendusche. So basically, if you have a sinus infection, but like your throat is fine, just, maybe extra mucus, what you need to do is flush that mucus out. You could use a nasal spray, but sinus rinse kits or neti pots, honestly, I think that they are amazing for a sinus infection. Whenever I used this, it would give me several blessed hours where I was more or less mucus free, and I could actually practice my singing. I managed to actually memorize and learn a whole new piece in the 1 week I had before I had to go to my opera program, largely because this thing helped me get all the junk out of my nose. Now, there are a couple things to note when you're using something like this, though. First of all, you need to be careful of what kind of water you're using. Because your nasal passageways are so close to your brain, if there's like bacteria or anything in the water, it would be very easy for it to affect your brain. So it is recommended that you either use distilled water or you boil your water first in order to use it in this. Now, if you're boiling your water, make sure you let it cool enough that it's not going to scald you. That is not ideal. But you also don't want to do it with cold water. I tried it once just to kind of see, what the difference would be. Warm water, definitely best to use. If it's cool water or too warm, it is not going to be good for you. It is not going to be comfortable. So warm water, it'll flush everything out into the sink, and you'll have several hours to be able to do whatever you need to do. I would use this maybe twice a day until I had kind of recovered and was no longer constantly stuffed. It honestly saved me. I'm so grateful for it, so grateful to my aunt for helping me. Now, this last bit of advice that I have should really only be used like in emergencies. If all your preventative measures fail and you get sick a matter of days before you're performing, or in some cases a matter of hours before performing, something that can be really helpful are corticosteroids. However, there are risks in using corticosteroids, so you have to always consider with your doctor whether or not it's right for your specific situation. Now, back when I was in university, before one of my big performances, and I think before at least 1 or 2 of my auditions for universities, my dad and I went to the doctor and asked for anything they could do to help me recover so that I could actually perform, so I could actually audition. And the doctor suggested to me this corticosteroid. Now, at least in my personal situation, they gave me this little plastic cup with pink liquid inside. And that's kind of how it's always been for me. I would go in like a few days before I would have a big performance, and I would ask, and if the situation called for it, I would drink it. I think I've used it 3 or 4 times. But there are different ways that it can be administered. I've never personally experienced the other ways, but from what I understand, if you've about a full week before your performance, you might be prescribed corticosteroids in pill form, and basically have a little like week-long prescription where you have to take these meds every day. Or if it's a matter of hours before, you might get an injection. But again, I've never experienced either of those options. But it is something to keep in mind. You can certainly go to your doctor and ask. Now, one time where I was told I shouldn't take it, I was going to be traveling, and I didn't want to get anyone sick while I was traveling. If it could possibly be beneficial for me to take it so that I wouldn't be like spreading germs to people in closed quarters. But I was basically told that because I was traveling, I shouldn't take it because of one of the big side effects being that it can basically inhibit your body's immune system. It can make it harder for your body to defend itself. So it would have actually been very bad for my health to get into closed quarters with people after having taken the corticosteroid. I was fine. I was like, okay, good to know. And so I just wore a mask, brought hand sanitizer with me, disinfectant wipes, things like that, and just made sure to wipe up anything and everything I touched so that I wouldn't spread things to other people, be getting sick again so soon after recovering. I know this is a lot of information, but it's really important. Singers, our livelihood, our joy, our instrument is inside of us. It's our entire body. How you stand, how you breathe, all of it has an impact on your voice. And each voice is unique. It's beautiful, but that means that we really need to take care of ourselves in order to take care of our voices. So whatever you do, don't push yourself too hard. Sometimes you might need to push a little bit to, maybe expand your vocal range or to learn something new, but you know your voice, you know your body best. If you feel like something is not right, take a moment and try to survey what's wrong. Even if you can't tell the first few times, eventually you'll start to learn the telltale signs of what it's like when you're getting sick. I've learned them, probably the most common way is I'll get a little bit of a tickle in my throat, or maybe I'll start getting headaches a little bit more than I usually do, and I can usually tell if if I'm getting sick, even before I've technically come down with it. So remember, take care of yourself. I know it's difficult to find the right balance when you're learning about your body and how it affects your voice, but I believe in you. You can do it. I'll put my Instagram in the description below. Please follow me. I'd love to see you there. If you have any questions on video topic ideas, send me a message. I'd love to hear them. Now, that's all. Have fun, work hard, and good luck at the audition. Bye.